Welcome to Tomorrow's People, the podcast brought to you by Personio and me, Perry Timms. Everything starts with people. And that's the focus of this podcast. And we've got some interesting people to bring into the conversation and share their thoughts on all things that are affecting the world of work, HR, and the people profession. Podcasts are a great way not only to learn on the go, immerse yourself into something really, really thoughtful, but meet new people. And that's what happened with this episode's guest, Chris Shambrook. I was on a podcast with Chris. I'd looked briefly into Chris's work, and then we just clicked on all things to do with motivation and performance. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Chris Shambrook. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invite, Perry. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so we kicked around thoughts on a podcast. We've shared a few social posts. And when this series was convened, one of the things I absolutely wanted to talk about was stuff that you are clearly fascinated by and practicing now. But we'll get onto that in a minute. I think for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, let's have a little Chris Shambrook story. How did you get here?
How did I get here? So I guess from a professional perspective, if I go back to the start of profession, I did my PhD, having done a sports science degree, did a PhD in performance psychology, lectured for a while, but alongside that started sort of practicing sports psychology in, the elite sporting world.
Right.
So that kind of took me into a role with the British rowing team back in 1997. So I did kind of 5.5 or 6 Olympic cycles with the British rowing team as their performance psych, as well as working alongside other sports, but then also at the beginning of the century, kind of also taking those same concepts that were working in the world of sport into the commercial world. An environment where people are on the field of play every day rather than the training field every day, and kind of how do we take some of the performance psych stuff to help maximise performance and fulfil potential in that space. Quite a different challenge from the sporting one that we've got, where we're trying to peak every 4 years for an Olympics or whatever the sport might be.
Interesting, different cycle, but I mean, there must be something special about being associated with Team GB rowing, right?
It was great. Yeah, certainly it was really good. So I joined 97, so that was sort of, a good time to join. So that was when lottery funding came in and so 96 had not been a particularly great Olympic Games for the whole of Team GB. Lottery funding came in and things started to go on the up from there. So I was sort of with them, who had some success. So Redgrave and Pinson had won the only gold medal of the Atlanta Games in 96. So there's a little bit of sort of track record there and to build, but obviously with the coaches and the athletes and more funding, everything started to be able to be done more systematically. So it was a great period to be involved and get to work with some really fascinating people, hugely successful people, but, rowing tends to be super bright people as well who are, far too overqualified for doing what they do, from a sport perspective.
And for you as a clearly passionate and very interested in the topics of this, that whole experience must have been literally a learning every moment kind of thing?
It was certainly a good challenge professionally, because you're having to look to deliver value for people who are already exceptionally good at what they do in a very physically dominated and technically dominated environment. So if you're big, you're fit, you're strong, and technically adept, I've got to do the selling of, and how does the mind add value to this, to bright people as well. So there was definitely looking to fit in and add value was key. But also, absolutely a great learning, because you see people who have got recipes of success and think and behave in certain ways. You can kind of go, right, how does this all add up? Is there stuff that I can help make explicit and share with other people? Not that we're trying to copy and paste, but we're actually taking the good stuff and understanding how to help people do their own version of it.
I can imagine in my mind the images you're kind of modelling concepts, behaviours, frames of reference, all those kind of things. Like you say, not to replicate, but to bring into your...
To raise the consciousness, to allow people to kind of go, in the same way that the coaches would coach, this is how to do the rowing stroke. Can we start to make it more conscious about how we form crews? From the psychology perspective, or individually, how you manage pressure, or or how you are able to stay focused in moments of opportunity and moments of pressure.
Fascinating. And I love the fact that you've already introduced that it flipped into the commercial world and the world of work and business and so on. And we've kind of seen it before. Rasmus Ankerson, a couple of others have done statistical analysis and, Moneyball and all that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. But this is really intricate, isn't it? When you're talking about minds and will and intent and motivation.
Yeah, and really allowing the commercial world
Mm.
to maximize the likelihood of success by focusing on how to do stuff rather than the results that we want. And that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
There's such a push and a focus on deliver the result and hit the goal in the commercial world.
Yeah.
That still exists in sport,
Yeah.
but you train every day to get better at the things that are going to give you the chance of being successful.
Yeah.
So you can't try and win every day.
Yeah.
So you have to win the development game every day.
Wow.
So that's where you get down to the forensic level of what really is performance, because performance is a very specific thing. It's not a direct sort of, surrogate for results,
Sure.
which is what happens in the business world. How's your performance? People mean results. They don't actually mean what's going on for you.
That's got me thinking again in all sorts of ways. And of course, in the people profession, we have things like performance management to try and do that.
Yeah.
Now, clearly the intention on that is to create that regular touch point of review on performance. Because you're so right. I hadn't thought about this. As an athlete, you are literally practicing all the time for the game or the, Olympics in some respects. But in the world of work, you're in the game all the time.
You're in the game. So you are both needing to develop and deliver all of the time. And because of the focus on the result, we can be so focused on, is the scoreboard right rather than am I right?
Yeah.
Am I focused on the things that are important for me? And performance management is a case in point.
Okay.
In the world of sport, there is no continuous improvement initiative. There is no L&D department.
No.
Because actually that's the job.
Yeah.
And when that's the job, someone's having to put together a diary of events and activities that are designed to help you get better. In the world of work, we have a diary that's put together full of activities. Now, what's the opportunity there for us to say, how can I grow within this? So we're thinking about the performance growth as well as the direct need and being successful in a meeting or a pitch or whatever it might be.
And I'm hoping a lot of people who've designed those systems are now starting to have some aha moments on that, going, oh, no wonder. But clearly the work you're doing now is predominantly on the business side and commercial side. Yeah. So that transition into the alls-on kind of playing field is where you're at.
Yes.
Anything in particular that you are working on now or have worked on recently where you're kind of bringing to mind this is how it's coming together?
So some of the current stuff is definitely tuning much more into the zeitgeist around making sure that the cost of high performance environments is one that is not too much to pay.
Okay.
So from a performance perspective, and loads of organisations have sustainability initiatives, but do they have it for their people?
Right.
So, if we're going to ask people to be involved in a high performance culture, what does that actually mean in terms of helping people be ready and supported to do what are unprecedented but unparalleled and sometimes unreasonable things? And how do we help people enjoy that rather than endure that? And that's something that's coming up for us a lot at the moment. It still comes back to the right focus on performance and doing things in the right way, but the duty of care component, well-being. I'm enjoying playing with the thoughts about how can you make work a positive addition to someone's well-being rather than work is something that we need to then repair well-being as a result of it.
Yeah. It's a nice way to think about it, isn't it? There is a lot of repair going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Some of the interventions I see badged as well-being are almost like it's too late then.
Yeah.
The damage is kind of done, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose your point again, I think, about the enduring joy is a very nice way to just frame it in two words that people would probably testify a lot less about enjoying and a lot more about enduring.
Yeah, absolutely. And the similar parallel is survive or thrive, which kind of tends to get thrown around a lot as well. And what's really important to remember coming from the world of sport again, what was clear is that you end up with really ambitious people who have excelled in something which puts them, they become a valuable asset to an organisation. And unfortunately, for too much in sport, it has been an asset rather than a human. But because of that, you get what is a very deep intrinsic motivation. Now, most people in the world of work have a deep intrinsic motivation for something that draws them into a profession.
Yeah.
And the job of the organisation is to probably not destroy that motivation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do we spark that? And you certainly don't spark it by doing twice a year performance reviews, which are focused on telling people what they're not good enough at and where they've missed stuff. And so what we're thinking about here is just the opportunity to help people reconnect with their own ambitions, their own motivations, and say, well, how does my current sort of employment give me the opportunity to grow and thrive and enjoy the opportunity that I've created for myself, rather than end up thinking, what on earth did I apply for this role for in the first place?
Yeah. I'm imagining when you're working with teams, so not necessarily leader teams in strategic sense, but teams that are, in direct contact with the customer and so on, that probably what they don't do is they don't do that kind of programmatic, very natural occurring reflection on performance.
Yeah. And where we've kind of got a team effectiveness program or our elite team program, one of the key habits that we talk about is systematic reflection.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you can look at various places where review is done very well. So military after action reviews, sport, we've done it pretty well too. But actually, when you really understand performance, reviewing is a part of performance. It's not something that's done after it. Yeah. So talking to the teams about how do we build this in to part of your ways of working, part of your, the event isn't over until we've reviewed and fed forward from it. And so we talk a lot about feed forward more than feedback, and reviewing as a skill and having familiar ways of doing it so it feels efficient and effective. But it starts from feed forward with intention setting collectively. But it's kind of build your confidence that you're doing the things that you set out to do more effectively, more efficiently, and you're understanding the art of performing as well as the result that it's having more.
And there is a lot of science as well as art. You're absolutely right. The art is kind of how you present it and converse and all those elegant things that we do as human beings. And then the science bit is where we measure it and get some metrics that just represent it, really.
Yeah. Well, key performance indicators, which, again, the corporate world has roundly abused that acronym.
Absolutely.
Because they're indicators. So use them to indicate, we did that and it's gone quite high. Right, we'll do that again, rather than we did that and it's it hasn't progressed. So really use those tools in the way they were intended to build confidence, to build understanding, and to play with, rather than sort of saying, let's have a dashboard of KPIs and they all need to be green. It's just like you've lost the value of helping people play with their theories and test them out. And if you've got more than half a dozen KPIs, they're not KPIs anymore. They're just stuff you can measure.
Too many. I remember Alan Mullally apparently at Ford famously threw out the red, amber, green thing, going, you're just showing me what you want me to look at. Tell me how it really is. And it really changed the dynamic. I'm interested in how you are finding and using and appreciating both the mind and the logic and then all that emotional power, energy and so on, which is sometimes difficult to calibrate and channel. And so does that feature in your work about understanding the two dynamics?
Yes, it does, because I think, particularly, again, if we go back to working with teams, if we can think about, is a team united around a purpose that has feeling to it and emotes in some way? There's many leadership teams or many teams we work with, and we'll say, what's your purpose? And they'll give us a set of goals that have been asked, that, rather than, no. If you didn't exist, what couldn't happen in this organization?
Very nice.
And so what does that do for you in terms of generating a sense of responsibility and opportunity, and actually kind of go, well, if we don't do it, this and this wouldn't happen. So actually maybe we can start getting invested in a slightly different way, which brings in, some logic, but also some sense of responsibility to do that, which then maybe has some personal meaning in there as well. Sure. And how does this help you as an individual grow because you're part of a team that's seeking to add this value? So it's definitely part of the mix. And just understanding from a personality point of view, some people will be far more motivated by the quality of relationship that exists and how how it feels to be working together, and other people will be much more motivated by the sense of progress and momentum that some feedback systems are giving us.
And I guess that gives you combined energy forces, doesn't it? Just like different muscles do different things in the body, and different parts of the brain do different things.
And again speaks to the importance of diversity as a high performance ingredient.
Brilliant.
Rather than, we all need to kind of look and sound like leader of team.
Yeah.
Right, let's create some diversity so we feel that we've got a really good blend and we can use contrast and conflict as a force for good, but we know what our shared purpose is. So that's the arbitrator that allows us to get brilliant at collaborating. And I talk a lot with teams at the moment about the art of competitive collaboration.
Yeah.
Who's the best in the team at collaborating in order to help us achieve our overall aim.
Yeah. And I know Richard Hackman's Harvard Business School research from 40 years talked about compelling vision. Absolutely. And then he did talk strongly about coaching, and he wasn't just talking about the leader coaching everybody else. It was a coaching environment. I'm assuming that's, again, a key part of what you do.
Well, ideally, if you have a true team where there's interdependence and there are many different kind of connections that exist within the team, if we all know what the shared purpose is for the team, and also we have shared what our personal contribution is, what won't happen for this team if I'm not there, we can then start talking about coaching each other. But again, it's really important to differentiate here between randomly sharing opinions about what it's like to work with each other versus, given our purpose and your contribution, that was great. I loved how you brought that strength that you said you were going to bring. In this situation, I don't think you were as sharp on your, on your subject matter expertise as you normally. We are giving insight and feedback probably based upon what the person has said they're going to bring. Please hold me accountable to being X, Y, and Z. And if there's anything else you notice, let me know. But other, we get so much stuff in this kind of world around feedback cultures, which is just an invitation for people to randomly share opinions based upon their view of what they think other people should be doing, having not told them what that is. So we just get, the feedback becomes, it's not feedback, it's opinion that is not helpful.
And I think that's why people run away from it and feel it's all awkward. But you used a lovely phrase, which I know Marshall Goldsmith uses a lot in his work,
Stolen
feed
from,
forward.
Stolen from
but
Marshall
the principle
Goldsmith.
I absolutely understand, which is, observed action and reflection on impact, and then potential utilization of something different or tweaked or whatever.
Absolutely. So if I go back to the sport work, I had, from a confidence is critical in any environment. It's it's a theory of motivation, but it's also just a commodity that is so important to work out how we get it and keep it. But I'd always talk about confidence is knowing that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So through practice and development and training, athletes get really good at kind of going, right, that's what I'm going to do, and they see they do it. And so when you see you do what you say you're going to do, you increase the belief that next time I say I'm going to do it, I will do it. So it's very straightforward. But that's the feed forward. That's the intent. I am practicing setting an intention and demonstrating that I will do what I say I'm going to do. And that's why feed forward appealed to me so much, because it speaks to that this is, we're typically working with experts who have done a lot of filtering of what good looks like. So they are going to come up with an intention that is based upon a very well-modeled set of beliefs and reinforcements. So now we want to help them really kind of be liberated from worrying that what they say they're going to do might not be exactly the right thing. Go for it. Feed forward, try it out, do it as if you know it's going to be the most successful thing, and enjoy then seeing what the impact of it was. But it's that freeing up to go for it as if you know it's the right thing, rather than worrying about, there are 33 different versions of that I might do. I hope today's is the right one.
I think you're right about the liberating feel of that. And one thing I've always found lacking in those performance appraisal type conversations, whether they are devoid of silly job description linked tick boxes or whether they're actually well-intended exchanges between people, is confidence doesn't always appear in the conversation.
And it's socially, it's a really interesting one, because if you ask anyone how important is confidence for you, well, they go very. Just say, okay, well, and how often are you working on making your confidence as strong as possible? Not very. And when you haven't got confidence, do you tell lots of people? No, because I'm not allowed to. And when you've got loads of confidence, do you tell people? Well, no, because I don't want them to think I'm arrogant. So we've got this commodity that we have socialized ourselves into sort of making it something of a taboo, rather than going to work and working together is a constant process of building confidence in self, confidence in each other, and confidence in us.
Yeah.
And and that links into the motivation stuff around connectedness and a sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I am trying to help people create a relationship with confidence that feels really compelling. And they're not trying to do it so that I think I'm the finished article.
Yeah.
I'm confident in many things, which means that I won't lose confidence easily.
Yeah.
But I have the confidence to keep challenging myself to, be the best version of myself that I can be.
That. It's interesting when you go into a top team then, that they almost feel compelled to be super confident in every situation. That's what I've observed and heard. And when I've had conversations behind the scenes, which I'm sure you have too, all sorts of stuff comes out that doesn't display that confidence at all.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where it's a group of individuals working more on impression management than it is a leadership group that is saying it's really important that we're able to work together here, and that we all understand that we're doing the best that we can, and that we're bringing our track record and our positive intent to see how well we can make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. But it's about being honest that, we all have... So the high performance psychology stuff is interesting because for me, it's always, there's paradoxes everywhere.
Yeah.
So the best athletes I've worked with have been the most confident and the most humble, and maybe slightly paranoid as well. So there's a healthy paranoia, humility, but a deep confidence.
Yeah.
Well, so which is it? Well, it's both.
Yeah.
And that's where it's okay for everyone to kind of go, yeah, look, I'm really confident that I'm the right person to be here. However, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to talk about, which actually will be worth sharing, because that will make sure that doesn't become noise and interference. And that, because again, from a motivation point of view, a fear of failure can be an incredibly strong driver.
Yeah.
If you can openly say, right, this is what I'm fearing going wrong, so we need to do X, Y, and Z to make sure it doesn't, in the same way that a desire to succeed is, a strong driver. So we can get people talking about stuff around this, which means that we can end up having conversations that support confidence without necessarily having to kind of go, I need to talk about confidence regularly.
This podcast is brought to you by Personio. Personio is the all-in-one HR solution for now and the future. We help HR teams recruit, onboard, manage, pay, and develop employees more efficiently, and our easy-to-use solution works across every part of the employee lifecycle. Automate your people processes and gain time back for more impactful work, like creating your people strategy. After all, everything starts with people. To find out what Personio can do for you and your business, head to personio.com. That's PERSONIO.com.
Feels like that's a really good way to start talking about trust, which, at the bottom of the Lencioni 5 dysfunctions pyramid, he says is what you need to do. But I'm also remembering the work of a guy called Henry Hipponen, who wrote a book called Why We Fear. And he actually said something that I thought was brilliant. He said, we shouldn't be fearless all the time, because that could be dangerous. Fear has good things that we need to know about. And I'm guessing you've worked with a lot of people in fear
absolutely.
Type
Well, I think it's because I don't necessarily think it is a negative that the fear is present. So what we're looking for is the creation of impetus and action.
Yeah.
So I'm not particularly big fan of, negative thinking is bad, positive thinking is good. I'm a big
positivity, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm a much bigger fan of helpful action from whatever thought has stimulated it, and that's exactly what that's staying from the fear perspective. I have a worry. I recognise it. I'm fearful of the following happening, and so it's really interesting. So at the moment, I've been talking with a lot of teams and individuals over the last couple of years about setting out their frame of reference. Has to be a 2x2 because everything is. What is the acceptable success that you're after?
Yep.
So let's get what does it look on the scoreboard, but how do you want it to be? But now let's talk about, is there an unacceptable success? Scoreboard looks great, but the price you've paid or the way in which you've gone about it, or some things are true that is to you is now unacceptable. You're burnt out, or you've taken a short-term win that has sort of stopped a longer. So there can be all sorts of stuff in there. But what's really interesting is when you then go to, and what's an unacceptable failure? What is something that you never want to have your name against, both in terms of you've not hit the numbers, but the way in which it's, but just that's not me, which leaves the last one of the four, which is acceptable failure.
Okay.
So we haven't hit some kind of objective success measure. However much we've missed it by, it's still in that category. Yeah. But what do we want to be true in all other ways that says we'll take it because it's a point of growth, it's a point of opportunity? If we do that from the outset, people who are driven by the fear of failure, they've now labelled unacceptable failure, acceptable failure. We've accepted we won't always get the win. Yeah. Brilliant. We've now given you the opportunity to kind of go, right, use all of that force to move away from and move toward acceptable success. For people driven by a fear of the desire to succeed, loads of clarity on that, but we don't get it and overplayed so that it's win at all costs. Yeah. And they also get to realise that it's not just succeed, there is the avoidance of some things from a failure perspective that can also give energy.
Wow.
But most organisations just give a goal and say, come back when it's done.
Totally right.
So the people who have got a fear of failure, anything other than that goal, which is quite a lot of stuff now, is just kind of, that for me seems, it's paralysis by analysis. Everything is potentially threatening, rather than this puts a much tighter frame on it and at least gives us the opportunity to play with performance as it unfolds, to kind of go, where are we at? Heading towards a failure from an outcome perspective? Are we still on for a success? Yeah. Are we making the choices around how we do it, which gives us a sense of enjoyment and pride and satisfaction? Yeah. And it's just I'm finding it an interesting conversation individually and collectively to have with people.
Feels like it's right for the complexity of now as well.
Yes.
Because there are so many perspectives on things, right? And often they are clustered. Yeah. And you kind of think, well, which domino do I flick first? All that kind of thing. Yeah. What I think I really like about that one, though, is the dialogic nature of it. So you can dashboard it and use OKRs if you want to.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've still got that narrative to go for.
Yeah, yeah.
And I quite like it's pulled apart in those different.
Yeah, there's a spirit to it. Of if we don't do this, there'll be some conversations that we're not having that might have been useful for us to have. We're assuming that everyone has the same failure definition in mind. We're assuming that everyone has got the same cost of success that they're unwilling to pay. It's so let's not do that. Let's get that clear for now, for this team, for this set of circumstances, and let's look to update it. Rather than it's certainly not going to be a static definition. Might look similar, but there'll be some changes as we respond to, conditions and sort of opportunity and
I just went back to my project management days and the systemised way we were supposed to report and record risks in a log. It was awful. It was such a bureaucracy. And I think what you've just described is almost like a touchstone thing that you can keep coming back to. Yeah. So I really like that.
Yeah. Well, and also it hopefully raises a curiosity. I wonder what we can do to go from whatever position we're in at the moment, because we know where we're trying to get to and where we're trying to move away from. Yeah. And certainly from a performance perspective, a presence of curiosity and wonder and discovery is usually going to be more helpful than a single point of we just have to deliver on that. And so this goes back to Olympic finals and stuff, talking to athletes about it's pretty obvious you wanted to be in an Olympic final. It's pretty obvious what you want to get from it. Yeah. But if you weren't here, what wouldn't you be able to find out about yourself today?
Oh, that's nice.
What do you want to discover now you've given yourself the chance? Yeah. And is that potentially a useful energy to add into the mix, rather than sitting on the start line thinking I've got to win a medal? Which in a lot of instances is not necessarily going to be a helpful singular thought. It might be the start of a useful thought process, but it alone is not going to be a differentiator.
I love that, again, because it made me think about the fact that we're all interested in ourselves, aren't we? And if we're not, we've got a problem, I think, haven't we? Yeah. The curiosity about, what is my high performance kind of frame and moment, and how did I get there? And because we do tend to be hypercritical about ourselves when we don't feel like it's going right.
And I think that's so. If one of the programs I wrote a little while ago is called Playing from the Heart: How to Win When There's No Finish Line. Ooh. So this kind of sense of
continuous.
continuity of work, and it can be tiring, etc.
Yeah.
But within that, there's a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that people did. One was work on a deep level of self-acceptance based upon anything I might have found out about my personality.
Yeah.
The challenge is for you to find what you like about that and what you value about that, rather than you get some kind of psychometric and you kind of go, oh, look, it says these are my weaknesses and, here's my development needs. And then you compare it with someone else and you go, I need to be more like Perry on this. So you're instantly trying to be less like yourself and more like other people, which doesn't do a great deal from an acceptance and a confidence perspective. So there's a really big thing around that. Can we get self-acceptance?
Yep.
And then self-acceptance, it doesn't take long before that parallels with sort of self-compassion.
Nice.
But self-compassion being a realization that it might be difficult, but it's probably more useful to be kind to ourselves rather than just negatively judging. Yeah. And it's probably more useful to sort of see that there's a common humanity. So how I'm thinking and feeling is probably pretty much how most people would be thinking and feeling now, rather than no one else would be thinking this. I'm X, I'm Y, I'm Z for thinking this way. If we can get that kindness to self and common humanity, then we kind of get that relationship with ourselves that might actually be a bit more, we can be a supporter of ourselves. We can still be critical and demanding, but we're doing it from a position of self-acceptance and self-compassion, which might mean that we look after ourselves as part of the pursuit of fulfilling potential, rather than we drive ourselves to win the race to burnout, rather than the fulfillment of
that feels
potential.
Very of now too, because Tracy Fenton, who runs an outfit called World Blue and they teach freedom at work, has this self-worth conversation, which I think you've just described. And I can imagine there'll be people listening to this who are perhaps senior HR professionals, HR leaders in businesses, thinking it is really lonely, and I'm talking to myself a lot, and I'm critical of myself.
I think so again, there's all sorts of stuff on perfectionism and imposter syndrome. And again, I don't necessarily see why those things need to be labelled as things to avoid. There is something that those observations tell us about the relationship that we have with ourselves and what important drivers are for us. And in the literature, there's adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism.
Right,
So if I'm going to have perfectionism, what's the ways in which I can make it a force for good for me rather than the more difficult side? But that's when you then start kind of going, well, look, if my physical energy is good and I'm looking after myself and I'm rested, it's probably easier for me to have a helpful adaptive conversation with myself. But if I'm exhausted and I'm sort of, unable to, the body isn't supporting the brain, perhaps it might be a little bit harder for some of those sort of helpful versions of my personality to come forward. So it's a holistic view here as well. So it's not just about the cognition, but it's about what's the whole system that we've got, and are we making it easy for ourselves to enjoy some of the way in which we seek to challenge ourselves, but we look to do that in a way that adds value rather than sort of just increases lack of self-worth.
That's really nice, because I had a cliche pop into my head as you were talking, that whole fake it till you make it thing. And I think we've probably all said, I'm not sure I've got the horsepower for it or whatever. But there's something about us going, but I reckon I can pull it off. I want to pull it off. And some of that is, I just haven't had the opportunity to play with that particular tactic or that particular outcome.
Well, one of the other things from playing from the heart is... so a lot of it's based upon redefining your relationship with effort as well. So rather than believing that I have to always try hard in order to be successful, we kind of go, right, well, based upon your confidence and your competence and your track record and your demonstrated excellence, if I just force you to try a 4 out of 10 effort for the next 4 days, how good will you be? Because I reckon you'll still be pretty legendary. So let's play with that. So if effort is something that you can play with rather than something that you need to keep at full gas all the time, that becomes quite interesting. But it also means that I accept that sometimes I might not have as much capacity in the system. So I can't put full effort in. But if I've done the groundwork, I can kind of go, look, I'm probably at 7 out of 10 capacity today. If I can make it a 7 out of 7 day, I can still be really good. So I talk about the 100% mentality. Get 100% out of the version of yourself that you are, but do the groundwork so that you know the value of a 5 out of 5, 6 out of 6, 7 out of 7 person. And if you can plan and organise, and on the important days you're feeling 9, 10, and you know you're going to get 100% out of that, that again comes back to the Olympic stuff.
Yeah.
But most athletes on the morning of an Olympic final don't wake up in the shape of their lives.
No.
Because there's been a cost taken to get to the final.
Yeah.
So it's a competition as to who is best at getting 100% out of the version of themselves that they are on an Olympic final day.
Yeah.
But at work, we have to live that reality much more often. And if we're in an environment that's reactive too much of the time, that gets really hard to sustain.
It does, yeah.
So we're just trying to push stuff into how can we be more proactive and planned
Yeah.
about recovery and sort of, the delivery of effort based upon talent and expertise. Maybe we can tip the balance a little bit, so you're playing the game rather than reacting to the game.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That we don't think like that because we get so immersed and wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
But this gives you a whole different frame of thinking about what is success for me today.
And honestly, that's one of the questions that we, define what's success for me today.
Yeah.
And that frees the mind to kind of go, well, actually, success for me today is putting in as little effort as possible to get the maximum return from the stuff I need to do. And I would love more people to kind of go, I am having a deliberate low effort day, and that is success.
Yeah.
Because I know I've got a day, 2 or 3 days down the line where I want to put full effort in. And I don't want to burn everything today because it's 3 days' time that I want to have as much capacity as possible. Yeah. So you ask on the morning of that day, what's success? Right. Well, it's bringing all my capacity together. It's using X, Y, and Z recipe to be at my, so the what is success question is a critical one, and it comes back to success is a combination of both a result and a measurable, but also a performance and a how. Yeah. Make sure that's present in, extend that compassion to yourself to have both bits of the story present as often as possible.
I just had two distinctly different images pop into my head as you were talking there, that I've had this kind of conversation with HR professionals who have desperately wanted their top teams to just stop and think for a bit.
Yeah.
But they think they're dropping the ball because they've just got so many demands and so on. I mean, that must be a regular thing for you too.
Yes, it is. And it's being able to differentiate between different types of performance.
Right.
So actually the stopping and thinking with space and perspective to possibly strategize or give yourself a different input. Yeah. That should be a particular kind of team performance in the same way that we're ready to have a crisis response team performance, in the same way that we're ready to go through the typical governance of a meeting, which is doing the due diligence. So it's like going to the gym, and sometimes you might do a kind of a strength session. Sometimes you might do an endurance session. But if we're doing stuff as a team, we're recognizing that there are different types of performance and an active recovery session where we're giving ourselves a bit of space and a bit of time. And success for this period looks like some rejuvenation as well as some sort of maybe sort of seeing some stuff in a different way and a reframing of stuff. That's success. How good are we at doing that?
Yeah. And then my other thought is a piece of work I've got coming up, which by the time this is out should have happened. It's a leader who said to me, we've got a very intense management team and we're very good at what we do, but we don't have enough fun, he said. And I straight away went, oh, hang on a minute. I am not going to come and get you drumming or whatever. He said, no. We need to work on our problems in a much more energizing, enthusiastic and different way. So variety, is that an important part, you think, of performance and motivation?
So it's an interesting one. Part of performance readiness that we talk about is the contextual readiness.
Right.
So the context that we are working in, does that support us to feel ready to do what we need to do to get the results that we want? So we might change space, we might change the look and feel, or we might go to a particular place to kind of, bring in variety that way.
Right.
If we just stay in the same sort of physical space all of the time, perhaps it doesn't allow us to sort of think differently and sort of, have a different variable in the system. Yeah. But equally, the fun bit I always find interesting, because what you want is you want to be able to find out, well, hold on, let's reframe that.
Yeah. What
will this team really enjoy?
Yeah.
What will they find highly satisfying? What will they get a buzz from? Because it's about getting a buzz. Yeah. And that doesn't mean going to the circus together.
No.
It might do.
Yeah.
But it's right. What do you mean fun? You mean energy. You mean sort of something that feels a bit different in terms of where we're starting from, what we're doing, and we're changing some of the rules of engagement.
That's so good.
Which I think is that it's practicing. Maybe it's practicing creativity. Maybe, but it's also thinking about formation.
Yeah.
So who leads?
Right. Yeah. Nice.
So who's the person who's going to be, giving us the benefit of their personality and some of the way in which they might do it. So rather than all of us trying to work out what's the right way of us doing it, it's give someone classic back to PE at school. Right, so and so demonstrate for us, and everyone else tries to copy, follow the lead. But it's a bit of an equivalent of that when we've got some gifted gymnasts in the room and some people who are kind of, threatened by the very existence of a pommel horse or whatever. So, so we can play with, who might be the catalyst here.
Yeah,
who might we be looking to sort of, give them the floor. To lead us. And so it is about variety and sort of, again, the diversity of the team and playing to strengths and benefiting from some of that. So that I think some of the stuff I always like within teams is, we will typically lose confidence by comparing ourselves to each other person and their strongest attributes. We don't include ourselves in that comparison. So it's kind of, right, if we're all part of that, what's the confidence pool that we've got? What's my bit that I contribute? And I'm going to be as good at demonstrating that as I am at being able to pick up on the quality role modeling that I get from other people.
It's funny you should say that. It's like you listen to that conversation because we ended up, this business leader and this CEO and I, with joyful decision making.
Right, yeah.
That was kind of what he wanted to do. He said, I want to put a bit of spark back into how we make decisions. So we are going to play with some frames in exactly the way you just described and have people step in who are willing to go, I'll be the facilitator for that.
Then. Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some great stuff on design thinking and, just working through structures that make something that is sometimes implicit for people explicit and kind of go, right, let's make it an explicit process and play with it rather than, feel that we're having to demonstrate our leadership brilliance by by doing it off script.
Yeah. And the other thought I had in my head was my own team. Because we're remote, we've got into actually a very good practice where we check in every day on Slack, but we check in about how do we feel? What happened to us yesterday? And it's become this way. It wasn't engineered this way. A lovely reflection point.
Yeah.
A lovely kind of feed forward because we do say what we're coming up to. A lovely way of describing how we are emotionally and how we are cognitively and whether we're deep working and whatever it is. And it hadn't occurred to me that what we're doing there is we are just socializing. Performance and motivation.
Yeah. So we use Slack as well. So for quite a lot of time, we had I think Stand Up Alice was the bot, and you could sort of program questions to come through. So we had a stand up at the beginning of each day, which was 5 questions about how you're feeling, etc. etc. So very similar. And it's really useful. And when we're doing, those of us who are out kind of working with customers, we're on, we've got a delivery channel on there. So there'll be an intention setting. So to everyone else in the business, here's what I'm going to do today. Nice. This is how I'm going to be. This is the value of ours that we're portraying. So again, we play with this stuff for ourselves in order to get the value. Because again, we're a remote team. And it's good fun being that way, but it has its challenges of staying connected as people and sort of, tuning in. But some of the technology can work really well, but it's making sure that it's you're seeking to get the value from it rather than thinking that it's a process that is going to deliver some magic independently.
Definitely that. And I was just thinking in the way that you describe, you want to practice what you actually help people learn and teach. I'm guessing the same sort of question, I suppose, I'm going to put as a provocation to any HR teams listening to this. It's like, you probably get some people reluctant to do performance management or any of this appraisal stuff or performance dashboards or whatever. How good are you at it? And what have you done to make it sparky and joyful and really powerful and value creating?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think performance management and performance improvement, all of that stuff, I think it needs rebranding, it needs reframing, and because what value is there? What value is there for something that exists in an organisation that you wait for someone to become mediocre before they get performance managed?
Exactly that.
What happened between them being the ideal candidate that was brought in to this point? That's an admittance of negligence.
It's tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, rather than, hello, welcome to the organisation. You're on a performance improvement plan. Every single day that you're here, we can't wait to find out how much we can help each other grow.
Where you can, right?
And if it's a mutual thing, then then we don't have to wait for the remedial action to pay attention to people's need for growth.
So I've loved where this has gone, and I'm hoping there are some real threads that people have gotten onto. And there's a 2x2 already drawn in my head from what you talked about earlier. Anything I haven't asked, Chris, that you want to share just before we close?
So I guess if you want to explore the 2x2 and lots of other stuff around it, theperformanceroom.co.uk.
Okay.
That we wanted to kind of democratize a load of performance stuff a few years ago. So there's loads of free stuff on there. So just kind of crack onto there, because there's all sorts of this philosophy in sort of form of infographics, small videos, tools, guides, etc. So if people want, there's an easy access to kind of dip in, test it, see what value you can get from it as well, but kind of go and fill your boots, everyone.
Lovely. And I think actually fill your boots is a really nice way to wrap it up, because performance is often about putting on the boots and feeling the pain of them compressing your feet. And I'm having a training shoe metaphor in my mind now. It's like we all want to slip on that comfy, because then we perform, right?
Yeah,
when we're not comfortable, when we're oppressed and scrutinized, we want to perform.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was witching on about this on LinkedIn the other day about just sort of just stop going. You have to get out your comfort zone in order to grow and learn. Actually, we need people to be in their comfort zone, enjoying what they're doing and finding out how good they can be with what they've built already. There's a time and a place for expanding yourself, but most of the time, let's be blissfully within our comfort zone and proudly within it, to kind of go, I am enough here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what value it delivers today. If we get systematic about getting in and out of comfort zone with the desire to stay in it, let's make work easy and enjoyable and fun, to celebrate the talents that people are. And that's where I think we should be going with all this stuff.
I'm loving that. Chris Shambrook, thanks very much for that. Pleasure, I knew it would get me into all sorts of mental models and thoughts and so on. So there's a lot I'm going to do afterwards. So hopefully there's another episode there for you to kind of get sparked into action. And I think what Chris has given us the reminders of is that there's this connection between what I really want to do and what I'm able to do, and learn the way into making that your 7 out of 7 in that day, if that's what it takes, or 10 out of 10 when you've really got to step into that sort of space. But the comfort thing, be comfortable, because what we're talking about here is everything starts with people. Back yourself, look after yourself, be your own performance coach. Love the way that you can bring other people together in this. And I think I'll leave you with that to play with, as Chris said, because we don't all have to be champions, but we want to be the champion of ourselves. So thanks for listening to that. And we'll be with you again soon in another episode. Thank you, Chris.